As Russia steps up its war in Ukraine, the rippling effects are showing up in people's daily lives around the world. Supply chain disruptions are a direct consequence, and prices at grocery stores are moving in the same direction as prices at the gas pump. It is an issue that is expected to put millions of people in hunger throughout the world. To break down how we got here, we are joined now by Bloomberg's Megan Durson in London. She has been covering agriculture and commodity markets closely throughout this invasion. Megan, it's so good to see you. You look at a chart of food prices, the UN Food Price Index, and it is at record highs. And now the war in Ukraine is driving prices higher still. Russia and Ukraine are at the center of the global food supply chain. Can you briefly explain the scope of their roles? I've read that they serve as Europe's breadbasket, but really they're kind of the breadbasket to the world.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, these two countries, it's hard to overstate their importance to the food supply chain. So they export about more than a quarter of the world's wheat, a lot of its corn, barley, most of its sunflower oil. Those commodities show up in a lot of goods that we're all, buying at the grocery store, and they're sold, really from Africa to Asia and Europe. These countries are suppliers to a lot of the world.
Right. And I think it's important to point out it's not just grain, but it's also sunflower oil. And Russia also produces the fertilizers that farmers rely on to grow their crops, too.
That's right. And fertilizer prices have already been quite high. And Russia has signaled, that it might be moving to restrict some of those exports as well. So could risk some further gains for fertilizer prices. That's one, a nutrient that is spread on most of the grain fields, a lot of the crop fields for growers around the world.
Now, when it comes to the wheat that Russia and Ukraine supply, Russia's wheat is not sanctioned, right? I mean, there's no rules against importing Russian wheat. Walk us through how much Russian and Ukrainian wheat is actually flowing versus what's disrupted because of transportation channels being blocked.
Sure. So, at this point in the season, I believe the UN estimated that Ukraine has something like 6 million tons of wheat left to export. Russia has something like 8 million tons. That's for the season that runs for July to June. So we are past the peak of wheat trade for these seasons, but for those countries, but it's still a significant amount. Ukraine, its ports are shuttered amid the war. So, we're really not seeing cargoes flowing from there. And for Russia itself, a lot of its grain it transits through the Black Sea, so that requires vessels to get to its ports, to leave its ports. A lot of ships don't want to go through the Black Sea right now, given that there's military action there, and it still remains a bit of a question mark of how importers are going to treat Russian commodities, going forward, given just the financial pressure against Moscow right now.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that because it can get quite detailed. One thing that I appreciated about your reporting is some of the color. Farming is such a key part of Ukraine's national identity that the colors in the flag reflect that, right? It's blue and yellow, and the blue stands for the blue sky, and the yellow is symbolic of the golden fields. Even if the war were to magically end tomorrow, which is unlikely, of course, this is wishful thinking, but even if it were to end, the export flows would continue to be disrupted for a while. What's the reasoning behind that? What are people saying?
Yeah, it could take some time. So, Ukraine is at war right now. Some of its infrastructure is sadly getting damaged. Things like roads or, maybe railways or ports is a little unclear. But, that could take some time for things to be flowing as usual. A lot of the agriculture companies in the country have also, suspended operations for now. Things like oilseed crushing plants and things of that nature. So it could take some time for that to resume. And then on the Russian side as well, there has been all these sanctions, financial measures put against Russia quite quickly, and it's unclear even if the war were to end how quickly or if those measures would be rolled back.
Yeah, good point for sure. To what extent can other countries make up the difference in the limited supplies that are now available of grain and everything else? I mean, Canada, I think about, it's a source of fertilizers. The U.S. grows plenty of agricultural goods. African countries grow grain. Is that enough to compensate?
Yeah, so, there is going to be exports, demand going to other parts of the world. We've even seen a country like India, which traditionally isn't a big wheat exporter. It keeps most of its grain at home. They're expected to ship a record amount of wheat this season. Australia is also picking up some demand, the USDA said yesterday. French Crops Office this week raised its wheat export estimate, so that will help. It's just unclear if they can offset all of the losses. And the bigger impact would be if this war were to continue, what does that mean for Ukrainian production, going forward for the season ahead? Will they be able to export next season as well? Those are some of the big questions for the market.
Yeah, absolutely. The last time soft commodities, and by that we're talking about commodities that are grown, like agriculture, rose this much was back in summer of 2008. And we saw countries like Vietnam limit their rice exports to ensure that they would have enough to supply their own people. Any signs or any early signs of that being considered or happening?
Yeah, so just in the past week, we have started to see that ramp up. We kind of see, these protectionist measures. Indonesia, for example, they're a big player in palm oil, and they're kind of tightening some of their controls over those flows abroad. We've also seen some smaller grain exporters like Hungary, for example, Serbia, Moldova. They've all moved to ban at least some exports of grains. All those measures, even if it's from small countries, can add up at some point, or just risk sort of a domino effect. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but we have seen some signs of protectionism here just in the past few days.
Yeah, it only takes one country to do it before everyone starts to follow along because they feel they have no choice. The timing here, though, could not be worse. And you point out that global grain stockpiles have actually been shrinking for a number of years now. Why is that, Megan?
Yeah, so we have seen, there's been some weather challenges in some countries. For example, Canada suffered a pretty bad drought last year. Brazil this season, its soybean harvest is getting hurt also by dry weather. We've seen some impacts in other parts of the world too. At the same time, there's been some strong demand. As you might remember, China bought a lot of American agricultural commodities in the past year or two. So that's helped to pull down stockpiles in some places as well.
Right, and perhaps might lead to hoarding for countries that can get a hold of the supplies for now to make sure that their own people don't go hungry. So the net result is higher prices, limited supply, and of course, perhaps concerns about social unrest. I don't want to be alarmist, of course, but food shortages have historically led to social unrest. You think about the French Revolution, it was caused as much by food insecurity as anything else. Arab Spring, similarly triggered by rising food prices. How much of that is top of mind for different governments, whether it's in North America or whether it's in Africa or Asia? What are you hearing? What are you learning as you report on this?
Sure, it is something that we're watching. When we talked about those protectionist measures just now, governments put those sorts of measures in place to try to ensure domestic supplies, make sure that everyone is being fed. And at the same time, there are some countries where there already has been some shortages or panic buying. For example, in Turkey, there were some reports of shoppers, buying out all the sunflower oil on the shelves because of worries of where they would get it going forward. I guess the hard thing, right now is it's not just food prices rising, it's fuel prices, other consumer goods as well. Inflation is really top of mind. So, we don't know how this will all play out going forward, but the food is an important piece of the inflation equation.
Yeah. Before I let you go, Megan, is there any kind of food that we have plenty of supply of that's pretty free-flowing at the moment that we don't need to worry about?
So one commodity that has stayed fairly affordable is rice. Obviously, that's a staple grain for much of Asia, other parts of the world. So that's one where the prices, haven't seen the same spikes that we're seeing in crops like wheat at the moment. So one bit of good news on the food front.
Yeah, we all need it. Megan, thank you so much. Bloomberg's Megan Durrison joining us from London.